Introductions while folks continue to take their seats. I want to begin. Those of you who were in here over the lunch period got to experience a really, really special thing. Jake Davis. Jake, would you mind raising your hand so everybody can see who you are? So he's right over there. Jake was the filmmaker, and you blew me away. That was so special and reminded me why we're here today and what's so special about this place. And if you didn't get to see it and you were enjoying the sun, I encourage you to talk to Jake and get his information to learn how you might get to see more of his footage and film. So again, Jake, thank you so much. Hope everyone had a nice lunch break. We are moving into our afternoon programming. So while we had some kind of breadth of time this morning for a handful of panelists, this afternoon we have 41 people giving presentations this afternoon. Wow. 20 of those are in the form of our Quicktalks, which we've been doing for years at the Symposium, and we're really excited to be bringing that part of the programming back again this year. We have 2 sessions of Quicktalks. You'll hear more about them soon. And then we have our poster session this afternoon. And to kind of introduce our moderators, I want to welcome Peyton Curley Griffin to the stage. Many of you know Peyton, and I just want to take the opportunity to let those of you who don't know her know how special Peyton is. Peyton is our board president for the Northern Rockies Conservation Cooperative. Peyton was the executive director of NRCC some 30 years ago and has since served a central role in all we do, and today is possible in so many ways thanks to Peyton. So I hope you'll join me in welcoming her to the stage.
We're so excited for the Quick Talks this year. So many people answered the call for Quick Talks and posters. It's an amazing breadth and number, and we're really excited to jump right in. I also wanted to thank the committee, though, for shaping these sessions in a really wonderful way. The moderators today are, I guess I have to advance the slide, don't I? Oh, sorry, I'm pointing the wrong. Okay, sorry. So today we have Cami, or Cameron Burke, who is our program manager extraordinaire for this symposium, and she was previously an AmeriCorps intern last year. We're so excited that she stuck with us and is filling all these amazing roles. And I, at the same time, want to give a shout out to our current AmeriCorps intern, Lucia Ray, and the amazing group of AmeriCorps interns that are helping as volunteers today. Thank you so much for that program. It means so much for the nonprofit community here. And then also Mary Greenblatt was mentioned earlier by Katie, who's also making so much happen. Then our next moderator is Mike Tersick, who's been a research associate with NRCC for about 12 years now. He's a big data researcher, and he focuses on current and historic trends and also future models. And he has this amazing resource, climateanalyzer.org, where you can go on and you can construct visualizations and unique data analyses and presentations. It's an amazing resource for citizens, students, and managers and scientists, and I hope you'll check that out. So let's jump into a quick talk.
Hi, I'm Cami, or Cameron. I'll be introducing the Quick Talks. I'd like to echo Peyton and thank the review and steering committee for reviewing all the abstracts that we received. We received a record number of abstracts this year, and we're very grateful to have many of those applicants here, either giving Quick Talks or poster presentations. So to provide a little bit of context, Quick Talks are a long-standing feature of the Northern Rockies Conservation Symposium, where presenters deliver succinct 6-minute talks. This year's Quick Talks will showcase presenters from all over the nation. We're eager to host specialists from as far south as Taos, New Mexico, and as far east as Harvard University, and extend a welcome to the countless familiar faces representing our Jackson and Greater Yellowstone ecosystem community. Our first Quick Talk session is titled Adapting to a Changing Democracy. These talks will be fast-paced, informative, and provide a variety of different topics, beginning with the future of the GYE and climate change assessments, to discussions on rebuilding our relationships with nature, how we can foster care for the environment in younger generations. The latter talks will provide methods of coexistence and powerful strategies and ideas for local engagement. Please ensure that you make note of any questions you may have for our presenters. You will have an opportunity to ask them during the Q&A session, which will occur at the end of this section of 10 presentations. So I'd like to welcome our first speaker to this stage. Oops, hold on, let me go back to your title slide. All good. This is Robert Frodeman, Dr. Robert Frodeman, and he's an independent researcher, and his presentation is titled The Future of the American West, and I'll let him say more.
Thank you, Cammie. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to have an opportunity to tell you a little bit about this book, a book that some of you know about, that I had the pleasure of putting together about a year and a half ago. It came out in November of 2024 with University of Utah Press. I edited this with Luther Probst, who, as we all know, is a Teton County Commissioner with a hands-on approach to policy issues, and with another philosopher, Evelyn Brister, who is at the Rochester Institute of Technology. So let me get right to it. The book is concerned about the future of the American West, and we wanted to take a hands-on approach to this. These are 25 essays by sets of different authors, and each essay is concerned with a place and a problem. Thus, we have a chapter on Sedona and over-tourism, Farmington, New Mexico, and our energy future, their transition away from natural gas and coal and fossil fuels, Telluride issues surrounding housing, Lake Powell and drought and the canyons which are reemerging with the drought, commuting in Jackson, or what this is by Luther, what Luther calls the commuter shed here, this strange situation we have, people coming in from Star Valley, Teton Valley, even as far as IF and Pinedale these days. We have chapters on bear's ears by Native Americans, as well as Badger 2 medicine on the edge of Glacier National Park, Island Park and fire awareness and WUI issues, bear management issues and approaches developed by the municipalities of Aspen and Durango, and a comparison of how they've dealt with this differently, and dams and fish management along the Snake River by our own Carlin Girard, the executive director of the Teton Conservation District. This is merely half of the pieces. Some 5 or 6 of these pieces are concerned with the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, but we were trying to treat the West, the 40 million people that live in the American West between the top of the Sierra and the 100th meridian, as a unified set of problems of a landscape which is defined by water, or the lack of it, and increasingly the lack of it, as we all are all well aware. Now, we emphasized with the authors that we wanted this to be policy relevant. And so each chapter ends up with some kind of policy recommendation or lessons learned. The idea is that many communities across the West are dealing with over-tourism. Let's look at what has been happening in Sedona, and see what kind of lessons, positive or negative, we can draw from that experience. And so we're trying in this volume to create something like a database of solutions to our common problems. And as you can see here, we have a wide spectrum of authors. Yes, there's some academics, but also elected officials, activists, scientists, and journalists. Todd Wilkinson, who talked this morning, wrote a wonderful piece on recreation as recreation. The second one is spelled W-R-E-C-K. Okay? So that's the book in terms of the granular. But there's also a general theme, and this general theme runs as a red thread throughout the book. It is that we live in a culture assuming infinite growth, assuming that this is both desirable and possible. And in my own piece, the introductory piece to the volume, I argue that this is rooted in the thinking of John Locke, the political philosopher from the 17th century, as well as our founding documents in America, and that this is a paradigm, this is a myth that has come to dominate American culture writ large. And a lot of the story is tied to the iconography of the cowboy, the loner, the independent, the outsider, the person who can go their own way, the libertarian. And this philosophy, rooted in a certain kind of story or myth, is something that is outdated, which is anachronistic today. So, we all, to one degree or another, sense this problem, and thus increasingly we've been hearing the language of managing growth. Yes, let us manage growth. But I think that ultimately we must recognize that as a dodge. We need to expand our thinking and our language, for the challenge ahead is to recognize that growth will end. There's only so many people you're going to squeeze in Teton County or Yellowstone National Park. This is a civilizational level challenge that we face. And so the question is not, I suggest to you, will growth end? But rather, will it end before we ruin what we love? That's the message of the book. Thank you for your time. And finally, talk to your politicians about this.
Thank you, Robert. Our next speaker is Sierra Harris. She is the Climate and Water Conservation Manager at the Greater Yellowstone Coalition, and her presentation is Assessing Climate Change Priorities and Projects in the GYE.
Thanks, Cami. Well, we'll get right to it. All right, so I have been able to be a part of two different Greater Yellowstone climate assessments. One, I was the first one, the Greater Yellowstone Climate Assessment came out in 2021, and the second I finished writing in November of 2025. The first one included numerous collaborators that provided data and information, including interviews with conservation practitioners across the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem. But today's presentation will focus on this second report. In 2022, the Greater Yellowstone Coalition partnered with the Greater Yellowstone Coordinating Committee's Climate Change Subcommittee to create a second report with information gathered from interviews with natural resource specialists on the impacts of climate change that they were seeing in real time across the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem. The primary outcome was to learn how to integrate and empower the massive network of landscape-level knowledge, experience, and scientific expertise on climate change throughout the ecosystem. And I will say, I brought hard copies of all these with me today, so if you'd like that, you can get an electronic copy from me as well if you want a website address. Okay. Given the brevity of this presentation, I do encourage you all to read the full report that includes results both in a summarized format and a detailed appendices for each of the 9 interview questions that I asked. I had 36 willing participants, some of which are in the room, from 2 state and 5 federal agencies, 2 different tribes, plus 7 local and regional organizations. The interviews were completed in 2023, but given the change in administration, the report was not finalized until late 2025. I asked a series of 9 interview questions, and the answers to these questions allowed me to get a better picture of the impacts and issues that were being observed throughout the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem. For each question, I was able to categorize the majority of the answers into 3 main themes: terrestrial, water, and wildlife. For example, the high-level answers gathered from the initial question, have you seen evidence of climate change impacts, and if so, what? In the terrestrial category, people commented on increased wildfires and drought and receding glaciers. In the water category, they responded with notices of increased water temperatures, variability in flows, and changes in precipitation. And finally, in the wildlife category, people noted changes to population numbers and shifts in migratory routes. The final question deserves a little bit more screen time. So when people were asked what the biggest barriers were to accomplishing their climate priorities, they could be summed up as followed: coordination and partnership. There was a real need to strengthen relationships and improve data sharing across the ecosystem. Scientific expertise. There was limited institutional knowledge and a lack of funding to conduct new research and implement change. Working at scale. It is very challenging to work at scale, and the pace and scale needed to address the ecosystem-wide climate issues. Politics and policy. A strong need to reduce entrenched thinking and bureaucratic barriers. Capacity and funding. Limited staff and the ability to put funding that they do have on the ground quickly. Public support and sociological issues. Lack of community support and the ability to accept and understand impacts from climate change. And then finally, roles and responsibilities. Many people asked whose job was it to address climate change issues across their workplace. So for next steps, the final section of the report, I gathered all the information from the questions and helped to draft a framework to guide initial planning efforts towards developing an ecosystem-wide climate action plan. The primary topics included in the framework are wildland fire management, wildlife, terrestrial, aquatic, tribal, infrastructure and roads, ecosystem assessment, Greater Yellowstone Coordinating Committee's project screening, climate mitigation, and climate change communications. Each topic will then be further broken down into the following category. What is the primary goal? What are the action items? How are we going to measure it through metrics? What is the status? And what is the timeline? I don't think I'm going to go next. All right, so the hope is to use the framework to create an ecosystem-wide climate adaptation plan. We will first need to identify knowledge gaps, find people to fill leadership roles, and pinpoint funding sources to help move the plan forward. Additionally, we will need to coordinate climate messaging and communication resources across collaborators. Up until January 2025, the Climate Subcommittee was working towards the development of this ecosystem-wide climate adaptation and resilience goal plan. These were in the hope that these would be attainable over the next 10 years. Unfortunately, at this time, the Climate Subcommittee has been removed from the Greater Yellowstone Coordinating Committee's website, and the climate adaptation plan is in a bit of limbo as we try and figure out what pieces of the plan are still feasible and what needs to be put on hold until we all have the ability to work openly on climate change issues again. Thank you. And again, if you're interested in a copy of the report, come see me later.
Thank you, Sierra. Our next presenter is Ellen Len Montgomery. She works for Environment America as the Great Outdoors Campaign Director, and her presentation is titled Building a Movement to Save Our Roadless Forests.
Thank you. So again, Len Montgomery with Environment America. We're a national organization, and our mission is to protect the natural world. And thanks to a number of people, I think this has been previewed a few times, but in case you didn't know, in June of 2025, USDA Secretary Brooke Rollins announced plans to roll back the roadless area conservation rule, which was enacted in 2001 and currently protects about 45 million acres of wild forests across our national forest system. And this matters for a lot of reasons. I have a personal reason that it matters, which is that 26 years ago, it was the first campaign I worked on, helping to build support to get the then Clinton administration to act to protect wild forests. And this is, as I think was previewed earlier, the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem has roadless areas all around the ecosystem, covering more than 500,000 acres. And if the USDA Forest Service follows through on their plans to rescind the rule, it will open up wildlife habitats, recreational areas to logging and road building. Thousands of miles of new roads could crisscross our national forests, and there are already millions of miles of roads. The trees where songbirds' nests could be chopped down, trails could be clear-cut, clean water could be contaminated, and new roads will also create new opportunities for human-caused fires as people are able to access more of the backcountry. But we are fighting for our wild forests. Working with other environmental groups, I helped to coordinate the efforts of more than 200 and growing organizations and hundreds of activists working together across the country to defend our roadless forests. This coalition brings state-level coalitions across the country together to share best practices, successes, challenges, and resources. And Wyoming is well represented with a diverse coalition, including Wyoming Wilderness Association, the Greater Yellowstone Coalition, and I only have 6 minutes, so I can't list all of the groups in Wyoming, but there are a lot, and they've been doing really, really incredible work. Our campaign is targeting leaders from the 36 states with roadless areas. We're asking them to make public statements and to use any opportunity they have to push back against these plans. Our targets must also commit to defending these areas going forward, regardless of the status of the rule. And we are working to win hearts and minds across the country and engage a broad base of the public so that we can fight long-term to protect these forests. Together, our coalition has generated more than 600,000 public comments, nearly 600 media hits. Groups have held dozens of public meetings, and there are more to come. So what is working? We moved really fast. We had a guess that this might happen. And so within 2 weeks, we had assembled a coalition, had a webinar, and an action kit, and groups had gotten to work. We'd seized the moment. The public land sell-off debacle was barely over when they announced this new outrage, and so groups were primed to work together. I think this campaign is also working well because we're only focused on one thing, which is defending the roadless rule and defending our wild forests. So having a lot of people together focused on a single goal really helps. And we've got a pretty low bar to entry. As I said, there are more than 250 groups. Some are on the list, some join calls, some create content, some are lobbying Congress, but we share intel and resources equally with all of the groups that are involved. And we've got, I think, pretty solid big group communication, but then also a lot of one-on-one. So I I spend a lot of time, as well as the other organizers, talking to groups one-on-one about how to run this campaign in their state and their in their local communities. And then I think the last thing is recognition. We spend a lot of time working to give all of the groups doing work recognition and a platform to share. And I think because of those elements, we have built a coalition that will last beyond the administration's whatever their final decision is here and into the future, where we will protect those 45 million acres of wild forests. And I'm actually too short to see the time, but it looks like I wrapped up on time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. I don't know how she did that because I can't see the screens either, and so give her an extra round of applause. I am now welcoming Eric C. Atkinson. He is a professor and biology department coordinator at Northwest College, and he's also one of our research associates. If you are wondering why we are a little behind schedule, it's because every time I say the title of this presentation, it takes 5 whole minutes, but I'll go for it. On Consilience, Humboldt's Naturgemälde, and a metacognitive approach to growing committed environmental scientists and managers. Please welcome Eric.
Good afternoon, and thank you for coming. Thanks, Cami. This is Chimborazo. Chimborazo, at the time, was thought to be the tallest mountain in the world. And over 2 centuries ago, the great explorer, polymath, genius, abolitionist, writer, advocate, the person who I call the world's first professional ecologist, Alexander von Humboldt, and his partner and friend, Aimé Bonpland, scaled to over 19,000 feet on this and sketched everything. They sketched vegetation, communities, they measured temperature, they measured the color of the sky, if you will. He brought it all together, and that's Consilience. This is a graphic novel, if you will. I teach across the life sciences at Northwest College, which is a community college at the edge of the GYE in the Bighorn Basin, Powell, to be precise. I've invoked the time-honored journal club discussion approach like I was taught in general ecology as well as other courses. It doesn't work. Just like Linus, here, students stare at me, and it's bludgeoning, and it was very, very unpleasant. Why? I try to build trust, I try to build respect. They've never learned how to read, synthesize, discuss, nor take responsibility for their understanding or reactions. And that's not their fault. That's a lot of our fault. What we can do is tell and listen to stories, because people are in stories, and we actually are story creatures. So as such, let's go to see what Consilience really is. It's the achieved integration of knowledge, perception, and the judgment across domains of inquiry made possible by a maturing mind that can move from fragmented certainties towards relational, contextual, and ethically responsible understanding. By extension, we are situated within the perception of our knowledge of the universe, earth, ecosystems, place, and self. And I'd like to couple this approach with that has been described by William Perry. Students need the opportunity to engage with knowledge, immerse in understanding, while understanding their place in building their own comprehension. How in the world do we do this? This is a metacognitive approach. Metacognitive growth is about rooting deeply, growing intentionally, continually adapting, becoming committed to a responsible and ethical thinking, collaborator, and doer in oneself. Start at the leaves on this tree, work backwards. The leaves are responding timely. They are part of the system. They're responsible for photosynthesis. They recognize, by this analogy, they recognize their responsibility. It's more than the information that students know. It's more than Bloom's taxonomy, of which many of you have heard. It is seeing oneself within the learning. So I've endeavored to extend this metacognitive approach to each of my classes, including these four. I teach a lot more, full-time teacher, but these are four of them. Specifically, in general biology, I have them produce a creative work on a functional morphology of a cell. In environmental science, I have them curate an environmental science music playlist and describe why they pick those songs. I also have them build a conservation plan for their favorite place. In general ecology, I started with a graphic novel several years ago. Turn a classic paper like Kettlewell's 1955, that is industrial melanism if it doesn't jump out at you, into a graphic novel suitable for middle school teachers. I'll skip the next one, but also in field ecology, we do a lot of data collection, but I try to endeavor not to overwhelm the students with data. Ultimately, this addresses more than knowledge, but self-awareness and what I call consilience, because what we do is pre and post knowledge surveys. These pre and post knowledge surveys on the right hand, anything blue recognizes that their growth in understanding and their empowerment increased substantially. These knowledge surveys are built to take really a little bit of time, go really, really fast, and they just rank their comfortableness on a scale of 1 to 3. Here are just 2 years in general ecology. Anything above the diagonal is a positive growth. And ultimately what this, I feel, develops is a responsibility in seeing themselves as part of the system, or in other words, Consilience. So finally, let's go out with Humboldt. This drawing on the right emerged out of Humboldt's worldview of isotherms. And I would like to thank these list of people, especially my wife Melanie, who's in the audience right now. Thanks.
Thank you, Eric. Our next presenter is another one of our research associates, A.M. Rasmussen. This is a joint collaboration between A.M. and Andrew Ray, and it is called Colorful Collaboration, Creating Coloring Pages for Outreach and Engagement.
Oh, hello, and thank you for the opportunity to present to you today on our project of using art in the form of coloring pages to support Park Service outreach efforts. So a longstanding purpose of the national parks is to be a space for interaction and education with nature. Thus, the NPS has a tradition of science-based interpretation along with science and conservation. Public engagement and understanding are vital to foster a sense of stewardship and support conservation and wild spaces within national parks. Public support is increasingly important as conservation challenges rise. Art is a powerful science communication tool that can create positive experiences that integrate an emotional connection with science learning through visuals that capture attention and foster curiosity. An artist-scientist collaboration helps make conservation topics more accessible, explore relationships and events, and create lasting impressions that inspire awareness and action, such as this illustration that we created for a Frontiers for Young Minds article about amphibians overwintering in Yellowstone. Our project stands on these ideas of art as a gateway for amphibian conservation in national parks. The purpose of our project, which guides the decisions that we make concerning our coloring page design and distribution, are to introduce the public to amphibians and their critical habitat, to grow awareness for conservation of these animals and spaces, and to create interactive experiences that create lasting impressions. So we developed coloring pages that fulfill these goals, like our coloring page here of the plain spadefoot in Yellowstone. Our partnership between myself, a science illustrator and educator, and a field biologist and science communicator, Andy Ray, and other Park Service biologists, is an intersection of various expertise and experiences. We bring them together to create these valuable resources that wouldn't exist otherwise. The process of our collaboration starts with selecting an amphibian species to focus on and identifying key aspects of their habitat within the national park. These species often are selected because they are sensitive or that their habitats are at risk. The field biologists share with me what is important to communicate about these species, their habitat, and the park. And at times, I'm even able to go out into the field with the biologists and find these species in their habitats. From this information, I create planning sketches to figure out how to visually tell these stories. And with questions and exchanges with the field biologists, we develop them further. We take care to represent the focal species accurately and in realistic poses and environments. And we discuss important features for identification and accuracy. And with this iterative process, we put together a detailed sketch of their species, their habitat, and the greater park environment. We situate the animal as it might be found in its habitat, show recognizable features of the park, and then fill out the ecosystem with plants and other animals that would occur there, like this prey, I need to click it one more time, sorry. Like some of these prey species for this tiger salamander that we've situated within the Grand Teton National Park, also showing this beautiful floodplain and the bison and sagebrush that exist in this area. The resulting coloring pages are interactive spaces that encourage hands-on engagement with park amphibians and inspire experiences centered around nature and conservation for youth as well as adults. Our coloring pages have been enthusiastically received by scientists and educators, communicators, and the public. They've been available at NPS outreach events and programs, and also at visitor centers and museums. This coming week is Amphibian Week, where in past years, our coloring pages have been given out at the National Mall and the Natural History Museum. And this year, events in 3 Northwest parks and 2 parks in the GYE will distribute our pages for amphibian education and conservation. In some of these cases, there would be little or no educational materials to share at these events. These coloring pages provide opportunities for learning and bring the parks to those with accessibility issues. These materials have lasting application and use. We've worked hard to put these pages in places where they support active conservation. We are working to grow our collection of parks and species addressed. By next week, we'll have 8 complete pages out for distribution and 2 more in the works. And we're now in the position where we can start measuring distribution and impacts more formally. We plan to use these pages to create a coloring book that provides information and photos along with the coloring pages to be a fun and educational resource for a variety of parks. And these are our 6 completed coloring pages that address parks in the Western US. And in closing, I'd like to thank our collaborators and supporters, especially Ben LaFrance, and let you know that there will be coloring pages available for you to take with you at my poster during the poster session and then also during the reception. Thank you.
Thank you, AM. And definitely go check out AM's poster at the poster session as well. I'd like to introduce Suzanne Asha Stone. She's the Executive Director of the International Wildlife Coexistence Network, and her talk is The Wolf as Compass, Restoring Our Kinship with Nature.
All right. Oops. For most of my life, I have studied wolves without scopes or binoculars, usually through field cameras, through tracks pressed into the snow and mud, through their howls across a drainage, through the kills that they leave behind, and the way that they move across the landscape that they know far better than I ever will. These wolves live in my study area, and I'll show you some videos from them. They are, let's see if we can get them, oops, maybe the video's up, maybe it's not. I might have to have you check with them. Sorry about that. Let me see if I can back this up. Oh, okay, there was a big video, okay. We're just gonna go with it then. If we can get back to that original slide, then that would be great. Thank you. The wolves that live in my area are descendants of the wolves that I helped hand carry from British Columbia and release from the Alberta wolf reintroduction in the 1990s. They are incredible animals, and they are living in Idaho, which is probably the hardest place in the world to be a wolf. We have bounties on wolves in our state, 365 days hunts. They kill pups for bounties. The one thing that stands out for our wolves in our project area, which they've been pretty stable there, is that we don't allow trapping and snaring in the Wood River Valley, thanks to our local county commissioners. And because of that, it's much harder to kill wolves. Our study area covers about 1,200 square kilometers of working public lands. It's the highest density of sheep anywhere in the wolf range in the West. By every conventional measure, the wolves should not survive in this area. That under traditional management, the conflicts would be overwhelming. But they do survive here because the urgent lessons that wolves offer may not be about wolves at all. We've learned in this project area that really those lessons are about us. When our use of a shared landscape exceeds what the landscape can carry, conflict is often the first signal that balance has been lost. Wolves become a lightning rod for tensions that are older and deeper, tensions over land, over livelihood, over who belongs. Our instinct is to react, to control, to kill what threatens our standard practices. And in doing so, we forfeit the one thing that wolves are offering us, a chance to see our own imbalance clearly. This is what I mean by the wolf as compass. They do not tell us where to go. They are telling us where we are. In Idaho's Blaine County, the Wood River Wolf Project chose another path. We paired herders with livestock guardian dogs, timed the seasons when wolves and bands of sheep most often overlap. We use sound and light devices that simulate human presence on the landscape. And we built close working relationships among ranchers, agencies, and conservationists, people who don't always agree, but we're sitting at the same table anyway. Instead of reacting, we listened. We let the wolves teach us about their behavior, their territory, their movement, and we adapted our practices to what we were learning. Since 2008, almost 20 years, livestock losses in our project area have stayed at the lowest level in the West, where dense livestock operations and resident wolves overlap. With very minimal use of lethal control. We've lost 2 wolves in the last 20 years. Through attentiveness, through adaptation, through shared commitment, and under these conditions, life flourishes there. We have moose, elk, deer, also cougar, bear, coyote, wolverine, one of the few places left in the West that has wolverine populations that are growing. Sandhill cranes, none of them are there by accident. Wolves do not stand apart from this. They help weave it. By moving the elk through the country instead of letting them settle, they let willows and aspen recover. Recovering willows feed beaver, and the beaver feed the wetlands. They build these incredible water tables where they hold more habitat for cranes, songbirds, and amphibians. The carrion from the wolf kills feed eagles, ravens, bears, and the small scavengers we rarely see. Yellowstone made this visible to the world, but it is happening quietly wherever wolves are allowed to be wolves. This is the tapestry of an ecosystem. Wolves are one of the threads that holds it together. You pull that thread out, and the whole system begins to unravel. The wolves have been teaching us all along. They're teaching us now. Kinship is not sentiment, it is recognition that we belong to the same living family and the same living system, and our fate is bound to its health. Coexistence is not about passive tolerance, it's about active stewardship. The question is whether we're willing to learn, to adapt, to nurture the land, to listen, and to share the information to help each other move forward. We are teaching our methods across the world and learning from others who have discovered some of these same things in other remote parts of the world, the Middle East, Israel, on the ground in Europe, with other species. It isn't about them, it is about us and where we are on the landscape and our relationship with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Next up, we have one of our other research associates, Matt Barnes. He's a rangeland scientist and wildlife conservationist. He works for us at the Northern Rockies Conservation Cooperative and also with the Rocky Mountain Wolf Project. And a partner project on this is Colorado Parks and Wildlife.
Well, thank you, Cami. That was a tough act to follow. So I'm Matt, and I'd like to give a shout out to my fellow board members at the Rocky Mountain Wolf Project and to everyone else who is working on wolf restoration and coexistence in Colorado. Gray wolf restoration has expanded from the northern to the southern Rockies, where, no surprise, it's just as polarizing. But Colorado's actually had a plan for wolves since 2004. At the time, wolves were fully protected under the ESA, including in the entire state of Wyoming. Since then, wolves were delisted here in the northern Rockies, and Wyoming created its dual classification with the predator zone across 85% of the state, effectively blocking natural recolonization south to Colorado. From 2004 to 2020, we know of about 10 to possibly 12 individuals to have made it across Wyoming to Colorado. But importantly, in Colorado, state law prohibits reintroduction of any endangered species without a legislative mandate. So wolf restoration became a ballot initiative led by a previous version of the Rocky Mountain Wolf Project. Prop 114 directed Colorado Parks and Wildlife to develop a plan and begin reintroductions by 2023. The proposition also required conflict prevention and compensation. While prior surveys had shown over 80% support for wolves, that decreased markedly during the campaign. Colorado State University found that was due in part to negative media coverage and that yes votes were most correlated with votes for the Democratic candidate for president. The margin of 1.8% is often cited as quite low, but I would point out that that is a wider margin than the 2024 presidential election, but you won't hear me bragging about a wolf landslide. Meanwhile, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service developed an experimental population designation, or 10J rule. CPW went through extensive public engagement process over 3 years, including a technical working group that involved some biologists from the Northern Rockies and a stakeholder advisory group of which I was a member. The reintroduction was effectively facilitated dispersal from northern to southern Rockies, with the releases as far from state lines as possible. The technical group chose a, quote, medium pace of releases of 30 to 50 wolves over 3 to 5 years, but I would submit that medium is relative and arbitrary. The essence of the resulting, wait, this is not, stand by a second. There we go. Okay, the essence of the resulting plan is called impact-based management, which essentially means that we manage the conflicts before we manage the wolves. And separately, the Rocky Mountain Wolf Project developed the Born to be Wild license plate, which funds CPW's conflict minimization program. It raised over $640,000 in its first year, and it's up to $2 million. That is unprecedented. No other state has anything comparable. Colorado is building out an ambitious conflict minimization program, including what is only the third state-led range rider program in the country. We also have folks like me promoting a more livestock-centric approach to coexistence. Colorado also has the most liberal compensation program for any predator of livestock anywhere in the US, if not the world. It includes a missing livestock component that is roughly based on Wyoming's and indirect losses. My concern with that is that ex post compensation is a twisted incentive and potentially unfair to those livestock producers who do successfully adapt. We did have 2 packs form along the Wyoming-Colorado state line. One of them did not kill livestock, one of them did repeatedly, but both had most of their members killed in Wyoming. Only 2 of Colorado's current wolves came from one of those packs. Colorado has released wolves in 2 years out of those planned 3 to 5. The first from Oregon, second from British Columbia. The ones from Oregon did have some experience with livestock, and they have had more livestock conflict in Colorado than those from BC. But most of the conflict involved one pack, the original adult male of which was the first case of illegal wolf killing in Colorado. The number of livestock killed has been high overall, but it's been mostly at just a very few ranches. The anti-wolf backlash has been intense. I would argue that the narrow vote, combined with the medium, arguably slow pace of reintroduction, created a perception that wolves in Colorado were not yet inevitable. Wolf advocates defeated the first 6 or so attempts to undo the restoration, and livestock groups demanded a, quote, pause in releases that was defeated at the Parks and Wildlife Commission, only to be semi-codified by legislators in the state's budget. But the play that really worked was appealing to the federal administration after the 2024 election. This is part of the administration's politics of revenge against blue states, and particularly Colorado. The same U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that previously supported sourcing wolves from Canada no longer allows it. That's based ostensibly on a reference in the 10J rule to the source population being the Northern Rockies, but 10J rules don't have anything to do with source populations. They're about post-release management. So this has been quite an education, for me at least. Despite all the rhetoric about science, wolves are symbolic, and the debate is really about governance and underlying worldviews. Those symbolic wolves are polarizing, regardless of whether they arrive on their own or with help. In Colorado, I would say the most important things we've done are, ironically, a combination of a few very vocal individuals and a broad partnership. But if anyone is considering something similar to this anywhere else, I would simply say that direct democracy is a beautiful thing, but it's probably a last resort. The press is not going to be fair, and stakeholder processes can and will be sabotaged. So, thank you, and feel free to check out my website and click on Reintegrating Wildness.
Thank you, Matt. Our next speaker is a local business owner, Taylor Phillips, founder of WYldlife for Tomorrow and owner of Jackson Hole Eco Tours Adventure. His presentation is titled WYldlife for Tomorrow, Building a More Resilient Tourism-Powered Funding Network for Wyoming Wildlife. Please welcome Taylor.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here today. And yes, Taylor Phillips, husband, dad, outdoor recreator, hunter, angler, and business owner that relies on the wildlife resource of the GYE. What would Jackson look like if we didn't have this vibrant wildlife resource that we do? My argument is it would look very different, right? Wyoming's wildlife, it's not only part of our identity, it's part of our economy. And that raises a basic question: does our conservation funding model reflect that reality? So yes, WYldlife for Tomorrow was created in response to this mismatch. Wyoming's wildlife brings visitors into our parks, hotels, restaurants, retail stores, and recreational businesses. But historically, many of the sectors that benefit from wildlife tourism contributed relatively little to conserving the resource that helps drive the economy. So some challenges, right? Long-term conservation needs are growing. Like that's pretty clear. We've been hearing about some of that today. And the funding realities are changing, right? Across the country, most of our state game agencies are funded by hunters and anglers. We know participation in those activities are dropping across the country. Federal funding realities are not certain. So what's our next step? So it's important to broaden our conservation networks, right? We have local communities, public agencies, nonprofits, but the visitors that visit these locations and the visitors and the businesses that benefit from these visitors, I believe that they can do more. So WYldlife for Tomorrow was created in 2022, and this is a model that strikes to connect visitors to conservation projects. So there's a variety of different methodologies that we employ to engage businesses and visitors. So one would be co-branded products. So Cowboy Coffee here in Jackson, they have a Wild Cowboy Roast. Other co-branded products, the Pronghorn Pilsner, portion of those proceeds support wildlife conservation efforts. This is all in collaboration with the Hobbs School. And some other mechanisms would be like a stuffed animal program in hotel beds. The visitors take that stuffed animal. It incurs an automatic donation, round up at the register. And a project that I'm really excited about that we're working on currently is our conservation badge program. So imagine a badge, an emblem of support that, hey, you support wildlife. And imagine that this badge can be purchased online. It can be purchased at retailers. Maybe it's included with your hotel room stay package. And that's a badge that you can display on your person, on your vehicle, that you support Wyoming's wildlife. Think of a $20, $25 mechanism. We're gaining great support with the local community, with the state government as well, to help move this initiative forward. And so look for the conservation badge at retailers near you, spring of '27. So the data speaks for itself, that we know what people come to Wyoming to see wildlife. That's a top reason that visitors come to Wyoming. We know that the vast majority of people will pay. There's just not an easy mechanism, an easy way for visitors to contribute to the resource. So this model, yes, it supports wildlife and habitat conservation. These dollars that we collect from visitors are going to support real on-the-ground wildlife conservation projects, wildlife crossings, habitat work, wildlife research, and more. And it's super important in this day and age to broaden the funding mechanisms that support this research. And this model, it's definitely has a regional potential. Any community across the country that leans into the wildlife resource, promoting tourism, and that there are responsible, reputable entities that can make that connection, that can, work with businesses to put money on the ground. This approach is certainly transferable, throughout the ecosystem and the country. So yeah, I'd say so far we've been getting a lot of support from around the state with this initiative to bring visitors and businesses in the tourism space to the table, if you will, and we know that money talks. It's interesting. So I've my tourism business, Eco Tour Adventures, we guide wildlife programming in the parks. Been around for 18 years now. When I started the business, I'd go to game and fish meetings, hunting season-setting meetings, providing public comment, and I was one of the lone tourism voices in that room. And it's wow, okay, this industry, Wyoming's second largest industry, largest private sector employer, is driven by this resource. Why is this entity not present at these conversations? So Wildlife for Tomorrow, we're putting money on the ground. We're building that support, that voice, and I just, as the broader conversation, we just need to remember that in this day and age, as unfortunate as it is, we need to think in terms of dollar signs and the economy, and wildlife drives this economy, so this economy, travel and tourism, should step up. Thank you.
Taylor, I think you took my notes as well. If I could have them back, please.
Oh, my bad. Sorry. Do you have them all? That should be it. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Taylor. Our next speaker is Delane Atsedy. He is the Executive Director of the Indian Nations Conservation Alliance. We're very grateful that he's here joining us, and his talk is called Using Ecosystem Management as a Tool to Unlock Funding on Tribal Lands.
All right, thank you, Cameron. My name is Delane Atsedy. I'm the Executive Director of Indian Nations Conservation Alliance. We work nationally with tribal nations that consist of 55 million acres of tribal rangeland and 4 million acres of tribal farmlands. And so we provide outreach and project funding to leverage our conservation and regenerative agriculture goals. And to give you a better idea of the area we're working in, to give you a context, like I said, 55 million acres of rangeland, 4 million acres of farmland, and throughout our sovereign tribal nations. A lot of our tribal members, their average mean income is $17,000 to $23,000 per year is their average mean income. And tribal nations' unemployment is 60 to 70% on a lot of the tribal nations. USDA funding has been a bottleneck due to the lack of equity in our reservation federal trust land status, and they also lack a budget to perform their duties on tribal lands. To give you an example, one of the bigger reservations, 17.3 million acres, there's only 2 NRCS employees servicing 17.3 million acres. So that's a huge bottleneck for us. And that's where this ecosystem management compensation is starting to look more and more appealing, and people are starting to really consider it as an alternative because it'll help us build out our infrastructure, and it also has some discretionary funding that's not really tied to building out. So, you know, I always say you can use it to put kids through school or pay hospital bills or whatever you need to get done. So it is an alternative. So with that, we've been, and it falls in line with how we think of balanced management. You know, our tribal nations, they want to live with nature, and so it compensates them for doing good things that they're already doing most likely. And so we've been building a partnership mostly with tribal producers over the years, getting them prepared and getting them working with the early adopters, and then telling tribal nations, you know, this is funding that's available. I don't know how you guys are going to structure the cut of it, you know, 30% to the tribe, 70% for the producer. It's still up in the air right now. But other partnerships that we have is with the National Grazing Lands Coalition, Holistic Management International, Society for Range Management, Ecosystem Services Marketing Consortium, Nature Focus, Grassroots Carbon, and then also we're partnering with a couple MMRV reporting organizations like Earth Optics, and then we're using technology right now like Enrich Ag, Vents Fencing, and we're just now starting an agreement with Halter for virtual fencing. So the use of this technology on such a landscape is unheard of, large landscape. 2.5 years you used to wait to get feedback from rangeland assessment. And they're still doing that currently to this day. So with use of like Enriched Camera AI technology using NRCS satellite technology, you can get more accurate information right away to make decision making. And with the virtual fence, we're able to manage livestock in different areas where we never were able to utilize it before. So this ecosystem compensation, it will unplug the bottleneck, and we will reinvest in the education of the producers because this is fairly new to them. That's why we're addressing the early adopters from the start, and then hopefully we can build more, confidence in what we're doing with other tribal producers, and they all start to get on board. And then for sure, we're going to use the funding for infrastructure needs. You know, I think that's been the biggest bottleneck is we have an abundance of resources. A lot of the tribes only use a quarter of their water resources because of lack of infrastructure. And so same way with rangeland. You know, fencing is $14,000 a mile for a 4-wire strand. And, you know, some of the high fencing is well above that too. So our plans to scale this is by showing small success demonstration areas, and we're just getting those together within the next few months, and hopefully we can answer a lot of questions within the tribes and let the majority start to think about utilizing this ecosystem markets. Thank you.
Thank you, Delane. Our next presenter is Cindy Riegel, founder and CEO of Project Greater Yellowstone. Her presentation is titled Power to Protect: Local Government's Role in GYE Conservation.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cindy Riegel. I served as a Teton County, Idaho Commissioner for 10 years. I spent a lot of time in public meetings and gained a lot of insight on what county commissioners can do to help conserve, protect, and plan for the future of the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem. I'm passionate, in that time, I became passionate about local government, and really making connections within my community and beyond, and building coalitions to establish comprehensive plans and zoning regulations and land development codes that were more protective of the ecosystem and managing growth in a way that we can, maintain the incredible wildlife that we have and the ecosystem processes that this place depends on. And not just for, long-term conservation, but also for our communities, for our economies, and for our quality of life. So this is the kind of place that I spent a lot of time. I did come to this region to do mostly wildlife field work, and had some incredible jobs over the years in this ecosystem, but kept coming back to this idea that really local land use policies are going to make one of the biggest differences in the future of this place, and that is why I got involved in local government. I served on a planning and zoning commission in my community for a long time. Well, for a few years before I decided to run for public office. I just want to mention that the cities and counties and tribal governments control about 1/3 of the land in the ecosystem. It is private land, but they have land use authority and zoning authority and development authority. And so there is kind of a bigger role that I believe local elected officials play in conserving this ecosystem, and we really have to start pushing those leaders to do better. So the last slide was a county commissioner meeting. This is a city council meeting in Teutonia, Idaho. And I love this picture because really this is what they can look like in small towns. Yet these people are making really big decisions. And we were here, took this picture, but I was here to discuss Grand Targhee expansion with these city council members and kind of building a coalition of local elected officials who were going to kind of push back on that expansion, or at least make it be known what the impacts were on our community and on the incredible wildlife that use the area around Grand Targhee Resort. So this is, again, Teton Valley, and there is a boundary in there somewhere between the private and the public land. You can't see it, or we don't really know where it is, but it exists, and it's really important. Public lands are impacted by what happens on the private land and vice versa. And so some of that coalition building also involves working with our local public land managers on a very regular basis and maintaining strong relationships as elected officials and community members. Grand Targhee, there was a group of people, and I wanted to mention sort of grassroots organizing called the Fireside Group that was really pushing the elected officials on both sides of the pass to engage more deeply with the Forest Service in their decision making, and they helped gather information and make connections for us. And I think that grassroots movement of community members is really critical too, especially issue focused and very kind of laser focused on one thing, and it helps inform the local government about what's going on. This is a development in my county. What I wanted to say here is that the developers are always in the meetings. The community members and the conservationists and the biologists are not necessarily always there. So I want to encourage everyone to start showing up. And real quick, I'm going to give you a kind of an idea about Project Greater Yellowstone and what I'm trying to do throughout the ecosystem, starting small but building out. It's a movement to support, elect, and create a network of pro-conservation leaders that are champions for the greater Yellowstone ecosystem and work together to sustain its magnificence for the next 100 years, at least. Thank you. We will build a powerful coalition, with your help, of community members, conservation organizations, local businesses, tribal entities, in order to elevate the importance of the ecosystem in local government decision-making in the 20-county region of the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem. We'll connect, share resources, and train local partners to engage in advocacy, lobbying, and elections to ensure local governments use their authority to enhance, rather than exploit, the lands, water, and wildlife of the GYE so that it can remain intact and resilient. Lastly, elevate the land, water, and wildlife of the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem as a political priority and help communities demand protective policies and accountability so that conservation of the GYE becomes a core value guiding local decision-making into the future. This is, I'll leave with my last slide. My time is up, but there's a lot of things you can do. Take a look at this. And if there's an issue you really care about, form a group of like-minded people. Start putting the pressure on and showing up to meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. I'm going to welcome all the Quick Talk presenters back up to the stage. You can bring your name tag or feel free to just leave it and we'll remember. And then we'll just sit in order of presentation. The microphones are already on the table, so when you pick one up and start speaking into it, no need to fiddle with any buttons. And we will start to open the floor to the Q&A, which Mike is going to moderate.
While everybody's coming up, I had a thought related to how Katie started us off this morning. She asked us to think about attention and the different facets of it and how it influences the things that we see. And I guess if I had to add a dial to that dashboard, it would be the level of urgency that you have for attention. It can be, on one extreme, panic, which is an extreme form of attention that leads to bad decisions. And that's maybe the worst thing you can do. I think the second worst thing you could do is put your head in the sand and not pay attention at all. So I think maybe one of the values of this kind of a forum is that it allows us to take a step back and maybe have that intermediate level of attention. We're not responding to tweets or, posting on social media, but we've had a lot of thoughtful presenters here that put some time into formulating their thoughts, and now we can try to make connections among the different points of view from questions from the audience. And so there's the cube again that's going to go around for people who have questions. And I'm a little bit blinded, so if I miss you, just wave a little bit more intensely. Is there anybody that wants to start off? Okay, I see somebody back there. And if you have a general question, that's fine, or if you want to address it to someone in particular.
Dr. Atkinson, that's a really interesting approach. Have you kind of field tested this? Do you have students and managers that have been educated and adopted this model?
Thank you for that question. Yeah, actually I do, which is really rewarding. I have a fisheries biology manager that works for Wyoming Game and Fish now that went through my courses. He had suffered from going from a small town directly to the University of Wyoming in Laramie, which is surprising, a shock for a lot of small town Wyoming and small town southern Montana students to go to such a big liberal town like Laramie. He regrouped, came back, got on his feet, and just went to amazing places. I think South Dakota State was where he got his master's in fisheries and now is back in Wyoming. And he's won probably, I think I just finished my 17th year there, one of easily several dozen students, I think. And I believe that I approached it organically, but I really didn't start to pay attention and take data and perform knowledge surveys pre and post in all of my courses until maybe just coming out of the pandemic. So it's very rewarding. Thanks.
Wilson once told me that Harvard was not trying
And interestingly, E.O. Wilson also wrote a book called Consilience that has a little bit different definition of consilience than I take.
It seemed like maybe E.O. Wilson was sort of integrating knowledge vertically from like physics to chemistry up, and maybe you're doing it horizontally. Is that fair? Like in a multidisciplinary way?
Yeah, and I think E.O. Wilson's, he was an amazing man, and I think many of his strengths were in that ability to take disparate lines of thinking. I think he attempted what Humboldt, I think, succeeded at with his forays into recognizing his own history, like in Naturalist, and also with, what was the novel? Anthill, perhaps?
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, but I still prefer Humboldt's views.
But you were inspired by Wilson?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. So over here, question.
Yes, this is a question directed at Robert Frodeman. I agree with your last statement on your slide that growth will end. How will that happen and what will it look like?
Hey, there's a question. I actually am getting increasingly hopeful. I know this is a funny thing to say, but hopeful about the Trump administration that what's going to happen is there's going to be this massive reaction, and that he will have served as a kind of clearing the ground of a lot of stuff so we can then talk about creating new paradigms for the 21st century, for the second quarter of the 21st century. I mean, the obvious example of this is it looks like the Iran business is accelerating EV and move toward electric and renewables. And so all this stuff about pushing fossil fuels, he's likely to be, his administration to be the great promoter of EV and the electrification of industry and society. How's this going to work? Well, you know, history always moves in fits and starts. Other than that, I shouldn't go on too long.
You know, I think you and I are a similar age, and for our generation, the idea that there's a limit to growth is sort of an article of faith. You know, there was Paul Ehrlich with the population bomb, and Garrett Hardin and a lot of writers. But lately in the news, I've seen a lot of people that are worried about the population leveling off or the population declining, and it makes me wonder if we're outdated or if our views were just a function of prosperity. They were sort of a luxury. What do you think about that?
That's a really interesting question. When I started teaching at universities, my focus was on environmental ethics. And it still is in some fundamental sense. But I shifted to a lot of work on the philosophy of technology because it became clear to me that it's technological innovation which is overcoming these limits that we thought we were going to bump into. And so I think the question is to start thinking about the role of technology in our life. I sense a backlash is developing. AI is an obvious example, but iPhones in the schools or Chromebooks in the schools, I think that we're starting to question this sense that every limit can be overcome through some kind of technological workaround, an engineering workaround. And so maybe we were just premature, not wrong.
Yeah, fair enough. I see a question over there, or, okay, you got one.
My question is for Suzanne Stone. Suzanne, I thought that was a beautiful presentation, especially stripped of your support material. I read your most recent Substack piece, and given that this room is filled with conservationists, advocates, activists, I think it might appreciate the distilled message that you offered in that. Would you like to tell us about it?
Thank you. Is this one on? Oh, good. Okay. Distilled. Some of us been in this work for many, many decades. I can look around the room and see the faces of people who I've known since, gosh, the 1990s, right? And maybe even before. And the work that they've done, put in, has been absolutely the perfect work to do. And yet the wall that we're trying to move sometimes feels like it's never going to budge, that we have watched over and over again for us to make steps forward, and then the new research, the new policies all get pushed back in lieu of trying to hold on to what we've had in the past, the systems that have been there that are constructed to support themselves. And I think that's the way of every movement, that you look at the civil rights movements, you look at the Marriage Act, gay rights. I mean, all of these movements have experienced similar ebb and flow, and a lot of the people that put in all that early time may not have made it to see the actual change happening. So it's really discouraging when you don't know that you're winning, but all of this cumulative effort that we're making, I think will eventually break. We'll see the stars align like they did when we brought wolves into Yellowstone National Park, which surprised the hell out of all of us that actually got to happen. And then, another generation will think, oh gosh, the wall came down, but they won't know all the tears and years and, all of the effort that went into making that happen. So that's okay. Our work is to do the work. And I so greatly appreciate some of the folks that are sitting in this room that I know have done an amazing job. And they will be part of the reason that happens. Thanks.
Olivia, do you want to go over there?
Hi, my name is Chris Newbecker. I'm from Teton County, Wyoming, and I have a question for Cindy Riegel from Teton County, Idaho. And given your experience as a commissioner there and now your advocacy work with Project Greater Yellowstone, I guess my question is, what approaches have you found successful representing a more liberal community and more liberal policies, working in a fairly conservative state and outreaching to maybe state officials and other people within your state? What have you found to be successful in finding common ground and advancing policies?
That's a really good question. Thank you. I think language matters a lot. Local control is something that resonates with all local governments in Idaho. I spent a lot of time at meetings with very conservative county commissioners, from other counties around the state. And that 99% of the issues we were dealing with, we could agree on, so different political parties, but mostly the same issues. And what I'm finding now and working with some folks on the ground in Fremont County, Idaho, Madison County, Montana, and Sublette County, Wyoming, very different from the two Teton counties, is everybody's concerned about growth and change and impacts to ag land, ranch land, and wildlife habitat. Like, it's a very common, it's still a common denominator. Like, this place is changing so fast, what can we do about it? And then I think that's when you start introducing the tools, and I think that's one of the problems that we have in the ecosystem, is that planning departments that aren't as sophisticated as Teton County, Wyoming's, they don't even know what tools are available. They don't know, how to update their comprehensive plan to better protect, agricultural heritage of the place. And so I think there's a lot of room to provide sort of networking and tools and sharing of information across counties and cities in the ecosystem. But language matters, how you talk about it. I think our values are the same. Like, we care about, our community values are mostly rural, and ecosystem values are mostly, clean water, wildlife, being outside in open space and nature. Like, we're connected that way. Thanks.
Got another question over here, I think.
Yes, thank you. My question is for Delane. I'm curious. My knowledge of ecosystem services and funding for that has to do with CERCLA and Superfund, and so there were discrete pots of money. So, and forgive me if you said this and I missed it, but I'm wondering, is there a discrete pot that is set aside for this in an office that you are aware of, that you're working with? And if that's true, are you having any difficulties in accessing those funds, or where's that coming through? I'm curious about how that's working.
Yeah, a lot of the funding that I've been talking about is through like some of the big companies like Michelin, General Mills, and some of those contracts, which are starting to get taken up every day. So, I've been telling the tribes, if we're going to jump on this, we got to get going on it pretty quick.
So it's private funding?
Private funding, yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
Do I see anybody else out there with a question? No, several people, okay.
Thank you. This is for Sierra Harris. Hi, Sierra. Hi. I'm a fan of the, what's one thing that you would tell everyone that's came out of the assessment that everyone needs to know?
Oh, it's just on. Look at that. Thank you for the question. I guess the big difference between the two is the 2021 climate assessment is really rigorous, a lot of science, a lot of data, a lot of great people put together information. It has a small section, which was, they went around to different communities and called it Voices of the Greater Yellowstone to just sort of get questions and answers specific to various chapters in the book. So I would say that one is a very rigorous scientific document. Mine is more of a sociological piece of data, just sort of seeing what people are seeing out on the ground and their frustrations and where they'd like to see things move forward. I think the piece of information I would share, that's kind of a hard question, but it's just that we all need to be open-minded. There's a lot of opportunity to work together across various political fields, you name it. And I do feel like there's a lot of really great work that's happening, and it's just a matter of figuring out how we can work together instead of sort of these silos that we're all in. And that's what we're trying to do. Thank you.
Anybody else have a question? I see somebody over there.
Thank you. This is a question for Ms. Rasmussen. I was just wondering if you could speak to, so you're focusing on coloring pages, but I've heard a lot of other people talk about other kinds of art that they have used, graphic novels, et cetera. And I was wondering if you're thinking about moving beyond coloring pages, and if so, where are you hoping to go with that, or any other ideas that you might have for other groups?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, so we specifically presented on coloring pages today because we're really excited about that project. But kind of a co-project with the coloring pages are stickers. And so we've been doing some really, I think, beautiful renditions of amphibians from Yellowstone and other national parks, and also distributing those along with the coloring pages. And I think that stickers sound a little juvenile, but they really do come away with a lot of productivity, and they're an opportunity for people to take something with them when they learn about, say, tiger salamander in the Tetons or in Yellowstone, and then they're able to remember that experience every time they look at that sticker. And then also when they put those stickers on their water bottles or their laptops, then other people often ask and engage with them about that sticker, and so then they share their experiences and the knowledge that they learned. So along with stickers and coloring pages, we have a couple of personal projects that we're working on, like a small kind of comic-esque book that will address the life cycle and life history of salamanders in Yellowstone, and then also some other personal projects like that focus on maybe a little bit less known organisms like vultures and salamanders, and there actually is some of my art out in the lobby if you want to check that out that addresses some of those things too. Thank you.
I think we have time for one or two more.
I'm going to ask a question, if that's okay, Mike. I'm over in the shadows.
Okay.
And I'll note, this will be the last question. Sorry to take it from anybody, but we are going to break after this question. This question is for the three of you who haven't answered yet. So I'm looking at Taylor, Matt, and Ellen. I believe everyone else has been asked a question. I asked a question this morning of what do we owe the future? And each of your presentations, I can see that you care about the future. The nature of the work that you're doing is an effort for something beyond yourselves. And I'd love to know, kind of to something Susan brought up this morning about standpoint clarification. What is it about who you are and kind of, the person sitting in front of us today? Why do you care about the future? What do you think you are remaining hopeful for about the future? And how does your work plug into something beyond yourself?
Wow, there's a lot there. Definitely invoked some emotions. So thank you for that. It's like I think of what like the wildlife has given me, like personally, the experiences with my friends, with my families, with my business, and the 40 jobs that I support, and like I know my life, and I know people in this room and around the country. Life would be very different, right, if we didn't have this wildlife to enjoy for personal consumption, and then also just innately to know it's on the landscape. The United States of America and North America is a beautiful place because we have these wildlife resources in one of the last places in the world. So I think there's a lot at stake, and I think all we can do is put our best step forward to, we all have our own individual pathways, and we're all, converging on the same goal, and I think that's amazing and necessary, and there's a lot at stake, and that's the best thing we can do is one step at a time, and pivot as we need in the changing climate, political climate, physical climate, et cetera, and it gives purpose as well.
Pass it down, I think there, yep. To you.
Well, Katie, I can't remember all the questions, but I think the first one was, what do we owe the future? And I would say it's a whole heaven and a whole earth, as it has been for centuries now. I think we owe the future a new environmental movement, something like we saw in the 60s and 70s, but better, and that maybe transcends some of the mistakes of the past. I think we need a progressive movement that can appreciate the beautiful things about conservatism. That's going to be a hard one for some of us to figure out. And I think we need wildlife not just because they're a resource to be harvested. I mean, yes, I would love to live in a place where everybody could get an elk every year. That's kind of besides the point right now. I think we need wild animals as fellow travelers on the earth, and I mean that in a way that's really hard to articulate. And I say this because I grew up in a place that does not have great wildlife populations except for white-tailed deer and maybe wild turkeys, the species that actually did benefit from the North American model of wildlife conservation because they were valuable to people. But very few of us get to live in places that have wolves or grizzly bears. And wolves, it is said, are the animals that taught humans how to hunt. Our behaviors, our family patterns are so similar to them. Brown bears and grizzly bears, the oldest deities in the Northern Hemisphere. There is something profound about that, and we are not fully human without it.
So is it Ellen?
All right. This is such an existential question. I think a lot about what does it mean to be human. So this is the sort of why do I care? And for me, that's being part of the community of life on Earth and the richness of living on a planet that has, polar bears and elephants and a bunch of critters that I'm never going to see in the wild and some that I am. And I think we owe future generations the opportunity to be human in that same way. And then I've also been thinking, as I work on the same campaign I worked on 25 years ago, we also owe future generations the opportunity to, for a new paradigm. We, I think, are in a place where we can be using everything that's happening to really make the case that the push for infinite growth is no longer the way to go. We can give the next generation and the generation after that a new paradigm where they can reimagine what it is to be human and how we set up the systems that work for nature and happiness and health and are not about growth, growth, growth.
Okay, thank you all for an outstanding round of Quick Talks. Good morning. So we have a 20-minute break, and then we'll be back here for the second round of talks.